What is a good death? Is there such thing as a good death? Dying in a good way. What is a good death? Will you consider it a good death if you are bitten by a snake and die? Will you consider it a good death if you are mauled by a lion and die? Will you consider it a good death if you are stabbed with a knife and die? Will you consider it a good death if you are poisoned and die? Will you consider it a good death if you are shot and die? What is a good death? Is there such thing as a good death? Will you consider it a good death if you are involved in a car accident and die? Will you consider it a good death if you fall from a tree and die? Will you consider it a good death if you are hit by a car and die? Will you consider it a good death if you are hacked with an axe and die? Will you consider it a good death if you are stabbed with a spear and die? Will you consider it a good death if you are bombed and die? What is a good death? Is there such thing as a good death? Will you consider it a good death if you are starved to death? What is a good death? Will you consider it a good death if you die of thirst? Will that be a good death? Then what about just die in your sleep? Is that a good death? What is a good death? Is there such thing as a good death? What is the difference between being stabbed to death and starving to death? What is the difference between being mauled by a lion to death and being suffocated by a python to death? What is the difference between being poisoned to death and being involved in a car accident to death and die? What is a good death? Is there such thing as a good death? So, which death must be tolerated? The death of someone stabbed, or someone getting stabbed, or someone getting shot. Which death must be tolerated, and which death must be accepted? Is it the death of someone who starved to death or who died of thirst? Which death must be tolerated and accepted? Is it the death of someone who is poisoned or shot? Is there a good death and a bad death? Is there a good way of dying and a bad way of dying? What is a good death? If dying is dying, no matter how someone dies, if there's no good and bad death, why do we accept someone who starves thousands of people to death, yet condemn someone who shoots one person to death? Why do you tolerate someone who starves his employees and condemn someone who stabbed his girlfriend? Why do we tolerate someone who starves his employees to death and condemn someone who poisoned a husband to death? What is a good death? Is there such thing as a good death? If dying is dying, why do we discriminate between the killers? Because the employer is starving his workers, and a robber shoots somebody, then we lock up the robber, we let go of the employer. Who takes away the fruit of the workers' labor? The workers are not taking the employer's hands and use these hands to work in the field. The workers are not taking the employer's hand and use them to work at the mine. The workers are not taking the employer's hands and use them to drive. The employees are not taking the employer's hand and do any performing task. They use their own hands and they work. They are not working on the employer's body. They are working on the earth. Yet when it takes the product of their labor and let them starve and give them just enough money to starve them, we tolerate it, we accept it. Yet when somebody stabbed another person, we want that person, we lock that person in prison for a long time. We let go of the employer who is starving thousands of people. Which one is the better death? Starvation or stabbing? Which one is the better death? Shooting somebody or hitting someone with a car? Which one is the better death? Being mauled by a lion or being suffocated by a python? Which one is the better death? Is there such thing as a better death? So why do you discriminate between these ways of killing? Because workers are starving, workers are homeless, workers are being robbed because they are working. If they were not working, the employer will not be rich. If the workers were not working, the employer will not be rich. And they are not working on the employer's body, and they are not using his hands to work. Yet he takes everything they work for. And we tolerate that. He let them starve. We tolerate that. But when somebody steals 5 rand, we condemn that person to go to prison. Is there a better way to die? Why don't we treat death as death? Whether someone is starved to death, whether someone is shot to death, whether someone is stabbed to death, whether someone is bitten by a snake. If a man takes a snake and puts it on somebody's blanket and that person is bitten when he tries to sleep, we condemn the man responsible to prison. Yet when the employer takes the money which other people have worked for and claim it for himself and let them starve, we say it's acceptable. But if a man goes to somebody's house and steals one slice of bread, we condemn that person to go to prison. But when the employer takes, an employer is a multi-billionaire. An employer is the richest man in the world. The people who have made that money are starving. He's killing these people for their death. He's killing them. It's not different from a man who go to somebody's house and steal the food and let that person starve. So, again, what is a good death? Is there such thing as a good death? If there's no good death and a bad death, the employers must be arrested because the employers are thieves. The employers are robbers. They are taking what they do not work for. They are taking what some people have worked for. They are not different from a man who breaks into somebody's house and takes another man's food. The employers are thieves because the workers are using their own hands. They are not using the employer's hand, and they are working on the soil. They are not plowing on the employer's body. The employer is a thief. He's a murderer. He's stealing from the workers. He's starving the workers. What is a good death? Is it a good death when someone is bitten by a snake or when someone is starved to death? What is a good death?